And we're back for our Let's Play of Uru to Dunny. Last time we got a proper look at Dunny proper. And now we are in a massive lore room, which has all the kings in it. Well, all the kings not in the process of being reviewed at Dakota Rooftop, so. Well, let's get greeting. King Jakreen. Jakreen took the throne and is in the year 555 at the age of 80. By the time of his coronation, he had already reached the rank of Guildmaster in the Guild of Stonemasons. It was Jakreen who first publicly stated plans to rebuild the King's Arch. In 598, headed by Guildmaster Chorus of the Guild of Stonemasons, the design of the arch was begun. In 600, construction started, and in 625, the arch was completed. It was a day of great celebration, as it marked their first century on Earth, and because of the prophecies, allowed for the passage of the Great King. As a result, from the time of its completion onward, all kings sailed through the arch as part of their coronation ceremony. As construction of the arch was underway, Jakreen planned for construction of a temple of the Great King. Specifications for the building were recorded in ancient prophecies, and Jakreen made sure that each was followed to the last span. Construction was finished in 643. It should be noted that at the time of construction, there were apparently quite a few people who questioned the dimensions of the building, calling them rather odd and exorbitant. However, Jakreen would hear nothing of their complaints, and in fact, managed to anger quite a few of those who worked on the temple during its construction. Once the temple was complete, Jakreen ordered to transfer the gold throne to the temple that Rhinaref had built to the new temple of the Great King. Okay. Seems a slight bit of sacrilege, I don't know. Not major yet. 654, Jakreen's wife gave birth to a son. Unfortunately, the boy only lived for 10 years before dying of a rare disease. Ouch. It was not 10 years after the death of the boy that Jakreen's wife passed away, also at a young age. The tragedy seemed to have had a devastating effect on Jakreen in his later years. He was known to be easily angered and extremely harsh. I think the king just needs a hug. He remarried in 700, and his second wife gave birth to a son 17 years later, followed by 2 daughters. Records speak of various accusations of abuse toward his children, though nothing was ever proven. Regardless of whether or not there was abuse, it seemed he was never able to get over the death of his son and his first wife, as one of the prophetesses who advised him wrote in their journals. Her journals, I mean. He never seemed to really love or appreciate any of them, though he did leave the throne to the oldest of them. Well, that's kind of how royalty works, give or take. It was Jakreen who encouraged further private construction for the island in 775, including the Jateri district. He named the I-Class district after his first son, who had died 111 years earlier. Jakreen died of natural causes in 812 at the age of 337. It was often said that Jakreen died a very sad and unsatisfied man. Ouch. The King's Arch was modeled after a similar design on Gardner. It was prophesied that the Great King would be welcomed by the arch, and so its construction was obviously seen as very important. Because the Dunny numbers are base 25, the year 625 is very important, significant. Noted. Most were taken from the Regal Tobacco Vorpa, as is recorded in the Guild of Stonemasons records. It is not known what the disease was. Records only indicate extremely high temperatures and extremely sore and brittle bones. A bone ailment. Maybe H's had dealt with something similar. I don't know. Weird little stories are like poetry, they rhyme. King Visha. Visha took the throne in the year 812 at the age of 95. When Visha took the throne, he had already had 2 sons of his own and ended up having 3 more before his death, a large number for his knee. Though his father had completely rejected religion in his later years, Visha was an extremely religious man who, some say, tried too hard to push his convictions onto people and in the end probably pushed many away. Yeah. Yeah, that's generational conflict for you. Like your dad's an asshole, so you try to be a nice guy. Then your kids don't learn anything from you because they went too easy on them, so they become assholes trying to, like, it just back and forth and back and forth. Just be moderate, a decent human being, not too much to ask. In fact, he forced into law a number of strict guidelines pertaining to marriage and adultery, as well as oaths and vows, many of which were removed by his son. Well, apparently he didn't. Many say the greatest mark of Visha's reign concerned the health of his fifth son. The boy was a maintainer at the age of 50. On a routine check of ages, was almost killed. Though the cause of his near death is unclear, certain documents point to the inhalation of toxic gases. He ended up falling into a deep coma that the healer said he would never come out of. In response, Visha gave a powerful speech, boldly announcing to people that Yava would heal his son and he would awake again. Despite opposition from the church, two prophetesses who advised him, and the Guild of Healers, Visha maintained his faith for over 3 years until the impossible happened and his son awoke. Damn. I stand corrected, this guy's on the level. Though many disagreed with Visha's religious convictions, there was not a single Dani besides Visha who was not shocked by the awakening, and forced to look again at their own faith in Yava. Visha had died of natural consequences in 997 at the age of 280. He left the throne to his reborn son Mararin. From the Miracle, written by... Oh, I didn't read it. From the Miracle, written by Tishan in 1072. You know what? Seemed like a nice guy. So, just a bit clingy, I guess. I don't know. King Mararin took the throne in 997 at the age of 73, exactly 20 years after emerging from his long coma. From various speeches and writings, it's obvious Mararin placed a strong value on life. Through his 162 years in power, it seemed he did all he could to do. He could to emphasize that same value to his people, as well as make the most of his own. It seems the main concern of Mararin was the Dani education system. The fact that so many of his own people are falling by the wayside apparently upset him quite a bit. So in 1124, when Tel-Nar, a guild master at the Guild of Legislators, submitted his paper, Minor Guilds, Mararin was in immediate agreement with what it said. In the paper, Tel-Nar wrote, "We are creating a group of people who have no understanding of the Dani and their strength with our blood. There is a relatively small percentage of those who learn and keep our tradition through the guilds, and a growing population of fools." Mararin, following suggestions within the paper, placed the common schools under the Guild of Legislatures and began major renovations of that system, including higher standards for instructors and longer work days. Mararin also raised the time in the common schools from 6 years, age 10 to 16, to 15 years, age 5 to 20. From there, instead of entering back into society, as had been the case, students could enter one of the new minor guilds that had been proposed by Tel-Nar and accepted by Mararin. The first of these guilds included architecture, a branch of the Guild of Stonemasons, miners, and educators, and bakers, among others. While not pushing education, Mararin was focused on his own life, making sure that he was living it to the fullest. Most historical documents point to addictions to hallucinogenic drinks and various drugs. Oh well. As well, it seems he carried out his numerous affairs, prompting him to throw out the rules his father had written regarding marriage and adultery. One particular record shows affairs of prophetesses, although both the prophetesses and the religious community vehemently denied it. Get thee to a nunnery, and all that. Oh wait, she is in a nunnery. The public said little of Mararin's shortcomings, but choosing to focus more on the benefits he had brought them than the negatives. He died at a fairly early age of 235 in 1159 from natural consequences. Most expected the early death from his drinking and smoking, although many say it was somehow related to his coma years earlier. Any relationship between the king and his prophetess was extremely looked down upon, as both parties respected to remain objective one another and the people. Yeah, I suppose you have a near-death experience, like, you kind of got yourself a bit of the attitude of taking a nice dose of fuck it all, you know? Better than being depressed, I guess. King Khureen took the throne in 1159 at the age of 50. Khureen was the older of Merarin's two sons, and the two brothers were apparently close. His younger brother was a guild captain in the Guild of Linguists, and the two remained close for much of Khureen's reign. In 1159, when he took the throne, it would have been impossible to forecast a turbulent string of events that would start during his reign and not end for some years later. His grandfather had been an extremely religious man, though not everyone had agreed with his theologies. There were, in fact, a number of groups who had strongly disagreed with Visha, and though Merarin had not done anything to offend them, during the reign of Khureen they sought to make their own causes more widely known. The most dangerous of these groups was known as the Judges of Yavo. Though they had existed for some time, it was in 1303 that they began to make a name for themselves. Oh boy, religious zealots. That never ends well. It all seems to have begun when a writer mysteriously left the Guild of Writers in 1303. A few days later, books and ink went missing from their respective guilds. Khureen ordered a tightened security on the guilds, as well as a massive search for the vanished writer, but all to no avail. Unbeknownst to Khureen, the judges, led by a man, Eris, were writing illegal ages in an attempt to create a race they could control and force to go to war for them. Oh joy. In 1320, the Pento Age was written and the judges had what they needed. It was in 1323, with his wife about to give birth to his first son, that Khureen's palace was attacked by a group of judges, along with warriors from the Age of Pento. Khureen ordered his family out of the palace, as it was quickly being overtaken, and together they traveled to the other side of the city where a special linking book was waiting for them. While traveling through the King's Arch, rumors say that Khureen's wife gave birth to his first son, Alcindar. How prophetic. Or dogmatic? I don't know the right word for this. Something of deep religious coincidence. Something. I don't know. Khureen continued to live in the cities, although his family stayed in a secret private age. The city grew more and more dangerous as the judges began to destroy more of the city and kill more of its citizens. Khureen poured money into the city guard as well as the small military of the day, although it seemed too little too late. In 1352, Khureen was assassinated by a group of Pento warriors being led by judges. The city was thrown into complete chaos. Known as the Regalantantiak, the judges, the sect believed they were to exercise Yavo's judgment in those who could not truly understand him as they did. Instead of passing judgment, why not just teach them what their idea? Like, no need to stab people. But some people just want to stab people. Bloody hell. King Alcindar. The Great King. What I say, religious significance. Alcindar was 29 and living on a private age with his mother when his father was killed. Instead of immediately joining the city, he remained in the private age, apparently at the suggestion of his uncle, who had come to inform Alcindar of his father's death. With a few advisors who kept him updated, Alcindar stayed in the private age trying to formulate a plan for a war that was now raging in his city. Meanwhile, his uncle, still a member of the Guild of Linguists, was translating much of the Pento language and learning as much as he could about them. As it turned out, the judges, with the Pento, claimed control of the Dunny government after the death of Khureen and began to move into other ages. Alcindar, after being briefed by his uncle on new information, continued to wait. A few weeks later, the waiting appeared to pay off. Reports came back that the judges had killed the leader of the Pento for fear he was becoming more powerful and out of control. Unfortunately, the leader had not declared an heir and left two sons to fight for the throne. This led to civil war within the Pento and a complete lack of focus on the D'ni, leaving the judges empty-handed. Good things come to those who wait. As well, what forces there were spread out to other ages and no longer fortified in the city. The public apparently knew Alcindor was hiding, and with every passing day felt as though the prophecies were coming to fruition. Only the stone, while they passed beneath, listened to his cries and comforted our fear. Only the arch welcomes the reign of the Great One who guides us. Alcindor, they all knew, had been born directly under the arch. A new people, people of light, will bring great havoc to the dark, as they believed the Pento had done. He remains hidden, while another sits on his throne, was obvious. While the public waited for him, they only grew more willing to fight for him. 15 weeks after the death of his father, Alcindor entered the city for the first time in his life with a small force. He sailed directly through the arch to the palace and reclaimed it with relative ease while directing his soldiers and those who joined him as they saw him enter the city. Immediately he established safe zones and eventually informed the Pento that he wished to begin negotiations with the Pento warrior Makar. Alcindor agreed to help Makar defeat his brother if in return they would return to their home peacefully. Makar agreed if Alcindor would write them an age to return to. The deals were signed, and in 1376 Alcindor led a force to the Pental Age. It was there, in the Battle of the Great King, that Alcindor led the defeat of Makar's brother Tamawe and total victory for the D'ni. Makar turned over 2 leaders of the judges, and Alcindor found the other 3 in the city. All 5 were sent to prison ages, and the books burned. Some of the society had demanded execution, but Alcindor had refused. Fair enough. Regardless, his coronation ceremony took place a few weeks later, and it was said not one of the D'ni did not attend the event. Our cheering was as loud as thunder, and our pride as solid as the arch through which he had sailed. Throughout his reign, Alcindor wrote a good number of books of prophecies and encouraged his people to forget about their old homeland and focus on why they came to the D'ni, to start again, to focus on fleeing Yavo, and to make good and right decisions. To know Yavo better should be the focus of their lives, he claimed. It was Alcindor who brought them back to the attitude they had maintained during the reign of Rhinaref. During his life, there were numerous rumors about Alcindor and special linking abilities. Numerous witnesses claimed that he did not need linking books to go from one place to another, and numerous others claimed he could link to different spots within an age. However, none of these rumors were ever confirmed. There were apparently other rumors, much more quiet, which dealt with Alcindor and his relationship with the prophet Nehemiah. Though it seemed that Nehemiah had great respect for Alcindor, the same could not be said concerning Alcindor's opinion of Nehemiah. Apparently, the great king had little time for her and often found her advice foolish and childish when he did consult with her. As a result, it seems Nehemiah was rarely seen with the great king, and relegated to figurehead role for ceremonies and the like. Perhaps surprisingly, Alcindor rarely consulted with any other prophets, though he did have the choice. What, so he got a direct line to Yavo or something? I don't know, prophecy, I guess. Something. Blessed. I don't know. Unbeknownst to the public who continued to praise him, Alcindor was working with the guilds of riders and healers on a plague. Ooh, never mind. It was said that it could be used as a biological weapon in case such action was ever needed in the future. As far as the Pento, the link between their age and the D'ni was still open, as Alcindor insisted on the continuation of resources from the Pento, although it appears that some of his associates advised against it. Understandable. It was in 1466 that Makar came to the palace, through other books given to him by judges, and killed Alcindor's wife and 2 sons. Alcindor himself killed Makar in what records describe as an astounding battle. 2 days later, Alcindor ordered the release of the plague into the new Pento Age. Apparently his counselors advised against it, but he demanded his orders be carried out. The plague was released, though records don't specify how, and the entire population of Pento died 3 days later. Unfortunately, it seems as though most of them realized what was happening and did not die before linking to a number of other ages and infecting numerous other cultures. The sickness did not affect the knee, though the Gilded chemists began to fear it could mutate into something that would. Once the public became aware of the plague, they obviously blamed Depento for the devastation, as they had no knowledge of Alcindar's participation in the plague. All the books to which Depento had access were gathered together and to be forever destroyed. Then, in 1500, Alcindar gathered his people together to inform them of the truth. Fair enough. First step to making amends is admit you had screwed something up. It was in that speech that he told them he had created the plague and then ordered its release. At the end of the speech, he asked to be sealed into the temple of the Great King, as built by Decrene, with any infected books, as well as any books that linked the need to their past, as he had preached he must completely forget. A year later, Alcindar was sealed within the temple, and it was then that the dimensions and shape of the buildings made sense, as it was required to hold massive amounts of books. Prophecy, yay! Solith, Alcindar's chosen heir, took temporary charge of the knee, while the public waited for the Great King's return. However, after 6 months had passed, records state that Solith uncovered the final wishes of Alcindar and read them publicly. Alcindar, he read, was not to return, and for no reason should the seal on the temple of the Great King ever be broken. In addition, the note stated that Solith should officially be designated as permanent king. So convincing was Solith's shock upon reading the note that it was said the thought of the note being a hoax was never considered. Numerous personal journals and government transcripts state the public's disbelief in the statements. Solith himself said, "For how could he leave us in such a state?" Though there were many calls to break the seal of the temple, a direct command from the Great King was foolish. Also, he capitalized. Important figure, you know. As well, the books within the seal were infected books, and should not be opened for a good reason. So in 1502, the Temple of the Great King was renamed the Tomb of the Great King, upon orders of Solith, and he was assumed dead. However, most still believed he would return. The two brothers were both fighting for control of Depento, and Makar felt most strongly that his people no longer owed the judges anything. His brother Timai felt the opposite. From the Great King, written by Lashena in 1399. Nemia's Legacy, written by Taman in 1609. Though not done often, it was possible for a king to lean the throne to his successor if he wished to be gone for an extended period of time. No records point to the note being anything but the true wishes of the Great King, but it is interesting to note that was never even thought of as a fabricated note, as spoken by Grandmaster Namus of the Guild of Healers to the Council. Well, that was something. Great things and terrible things. Greatly terrible things. I don't know. King Solith. Solith took the throne in 1502 at the age of 79. It should be noted that at his coronation ceremony, Solith was given a newly designed crown. Alcindar retained his own, and it was common opinion among the need that such a crown should not be worn again. It should also be said that Solith's father had been the Grand Master of the Guild of Writers and helped Alcindar create the book that was responsible for the plague. While Alcindar saw Solith in particular, he never stated. Regardless, Solith narrated a fairly stable culture, excuse me, although one that was on the fringe of religious anarchy. The greatest leader of their time had left them, and they were a lost people without him to guide them. There are going to be repercussions, although it's doubtful anyone had sensed they would occur so quickly, most of all Solith. It was in 1520 that the prophet Nehemiah, who had been the Great King's own advisor, wrote the Book of Nehemiah and set the culture into religious upheaval. The book denounced the words of the Great King, calling him a fraud and an impostor, and gave logical arguments to each of his writings. He killed thousands, betrayed us, left us with no one to guide us. Why do we believe his words and expect him to still return, the book stated. At first there was outrage at the writings, and Nehemiah was considered a fool and heathen, most loudly by King Solith, who also apparently took offense to the writing. In 1527, Nemea vanished. Some said killed by an angry mob, and others said taken away by angels. Kind of reminds me of one of the defenestrations of Prague, where, because there were multiple accounts of bishops being pushed through a window. Although in one of the accounts, the bishops were either saved by angels or saved by a pile of manure. Yeah. I would have preferred a trampoline to that, honestly. Regardless, by 1550, there was growing sentiment that Nemea's book carried some truth. There was a growing tide of disharmony within the people, and there was nothing Solif could do to stem it. Those who had always thought the great king would return were beginning to understand that he would not, and they were beginning to grow angrier at the way he had left them. Suddenly, there are numerous reasons to believe that Nemea's writings may have carried some truth. Perhaps we have all been betrayed by the man we once called great, wrote one anonymous writer. Looking back, the credit should be given to Solif for keeping his people as unified as he did. In 1604, he announced his plans to create Karim. A civic district, a civic district including an opera house and concert hall. The direction away from the religious arguments was obvious to the public, but they seemed to welcome it. There was excitement for his proposal, and construction began in 1610. The entire area was not finished until 1650 due to varying construction problems, but when it finally did open, there was great excitement within the culture. Solif's wife passed away in 1735, leaving him with 2 daughters. It was not long after her passing away that he remarried, against the advice of a prophetess, to a younger woman named Jolatha. Jolatha gave birth to Solif's first son in 1748, and though Solif was extremely pleased, many in the religious community were somewhat apprehensive. Public records clearly indicate that Jolatha was a well-known member of an influential cult group known as the Tree, although Solif denied that fact to the day of his death. The culture remained fairly stable until the death of Solif in 1779. He was 356 years old, enough to throne to his firstborn son. Now that's an old timer even by Denny's standards, I think. King Maerta took the throne in 1779 at the young age of 31. There were multiple leaders, many of them from the church, who publicly feared that the appointment of Maerta would cause great damage to the already fragile religious culture. Their fears appear to have been justified, as Maerta's reign was a turbulent one. In fact, it was often said that it was his mother Jolatha who ruled the throne for most of Maerta's 236 years in power. Maerta himself had no time to rule the knee. He was much too busy to focus on satisfying the women who ruled him. Ouch. In 1817, Maerta proposed construction of the Temple of the Tree, marking the first time any king officially supported anything other than the original beliefs of Rhinaref. Ouch. Just as important, Maerta suggested that the line of the Great Zero, which had been chosen by Rhinaref, was inaccurate. However, he did not eventually change the line. He most likely realized such a change would have carried far too many implications among the society concerning construction, navigation, etc. His goals, or Jolatha's, in such a remark, were simply to question the beliefs of Rhinaref and encourage the cult to build in a newer section of the city. Joy. His remarks were all that were needed. The temple was built with strong opposition from some in 1843. A few years later, Maerta sanctioned the construction of the Temple of Water and the Temple of the Sacred Stone. Both were finished in 1876 and 1902, respectively. All were built on Maerta's recommended line of the Great Zero. As the years passed, cults sprang up everywhere, wreaking havoc on the religious beliefs that the knee once had. The Temple of Yava was empty, and its priests and prophets were small in number, as many had left to pursue other beliefs. In 1975, Maerta attempted to change the rules and restrictions of the Writers' Guild, including altering their oath. He claimed his personals would lead them more flexible in their writing, allowed the need to do more. However, the proposal was met with staunch resistance from Grand Master Tremal, who adamantly opposed the king, and as the records show, refused to change the oath that Ailish had written. As it turns out, the refusal cost Tramal his life, many say on order from Jolatha. Christ. Years later, many viewed Tramal's refusal as one of the most heroic deeds of Dunny history. If those rules and oaths had changed, many believed, as Tramal had, the path to tyranny would not have been long behind. And that is why we exist, wrote Tramal. Once Tramal was found dead, the Writers Guild as a whole refused to change or propose changes in the oath and regulations in support of their fallen comrade. Eventually, Jolatha, through Maerta, gave up trying. By far, Jolatha's most destructive action came in the year of her death. In 1999, she convinced her son to break the seal on the tomb of the Great King. Why she wished for such an action is not clear, although numerous possibilities were proposed years later. Though few in number, there were still some who believed the Great King would return, and Jolatha was infuriated at any power the Great King had. She possibly wanted to prove once and for all that he was dead, an impostor and a fool. Once others wrote that she was interested in gaining access to some of the ancient books, as the trees believed they held special power. Still others believed she was simply mad, while others claimed she was possessed and an agent of Jakuf. Regardless, the seal was broken. The act was carried out in secret, in the dead of night, as even those who opposed the Great King would have found such an action blasphemous and dangerous. A number of books were taken from the tomb and placed in the Temple of the Tree, along with what Jolatha claimed was a piece of the robe from the body of the dead king. Jolatha died 2 days later from an unknown illness, while the books she had taken out remained in the Temple of the Tree. Maerta quietly ordered the tomb sealed again, and much stronger. It was said that Maerta believed his mother had been cursed for entering the grave, and he himself was petrified of it, for any mention of the Great King in the later years of his life. Maerta, known as an unfaithful man, died 15 years later with one of his lovers. Ouch. Guild of Healers records indicated massive poisoning as the cause of his death. More ouch. He was 267. His murderer was never discovered, although there were numerous suspects. Though he had many enemies, it was most agreed it was either his wife, for obvious reasons, or son, who despised his father's weakness and lack of judgment. Ironically, it was that son, his oldest, whom he left the throne to. From the journals of the prophetess Alashe, precedent existed for such a claim, and previous ages sliding the Great Zero could either point from the Great Zero itself toward magnetic north, as Rena had chosen, or toward another prominent landmark, as Maerta suggested it should have been. Grandmaster Tomas of the Guild of Riders, in a speech to the Five Lords in 7034. Jakuf was the equivalent of the devil in the Dunny religion. I could get that from context clues. You don't see angels possessing people, I don't think. King Gan took the throne in 2015 at the age of 144. Though he was not necessarily convinced of the greatness of the Great King, or Yavo for that matter, Gan was far from the despot that his father was. Unfortunately, he was never quite given the chance to do much for his people, as the sins of his grandmother consumed his reign in the throne. 6 months after Gan's coronation, the first signs of the plague began to show themselves. Eventually, the healers would discover that the plague was an evolved version of the disease that Al-Sindar had created to destroy the Pento. That's gotta hurt. The evolved version cut Dunny lifespans in half and caused massive infertility. For the elderly and the young, death usually came quickly in the form of heart failure. The appearance of the plague and the eventual announcement that it was similar to what the Great King had created caused the public to cast most of the blame on the illness on the Great King. Very few knew of Jolatha's request to open the tomb. Those who knew of the breaking of the seal seemed not to have spoken of it, or possibly were not heard if they did. Yeah, it's kind of hard to tell a violent mob anything different. Numerous records indicate that as far as the public was concerned, their plague was the Great King's fault. Somewhat surprisingly, because of the infertility rates, Gan managed to have a son in 2050. He He died 20 years later at the age of 199 after being in the throne for only 55 years, shortest of any king. Gan left his son a population that was slowly dying both physically and emotionally, and there was no cure in sight. The plague ended up killing over a quarter of the Dene population and cutting birth rates in half until its cure was found in 2262. Well, that would be nice to read up on, I think. King Benisharan took the throne in 2070 at the age of 20, a record that was never surpassed. He was extremely young to inherit the throne, and the short reign displayed his immaturity. It was said there was never any control or leadership from the throne while Benisharan was sat in it. As a result, the people were forced to look elsewhere for some kind of trust or hope. Most turned to religion, leading to many more factions and cults. Many claimed hearing powers either from nature, special leaders, or Yavo himself through a variety of different means. Oh joy, ain't no oil like snake oil. It seems clear that Benisharan wavered in his stance on just about everything, including religion. Some speeches he begged Yavo for healing, while others he sought help from the tree. In the meantime, he was of no help to the healers or chemists, both of which were working hard to find a cure. In fact, some of Benisharan's speeches point to public condemnation of the guilds, accusing them of shallow efforts and failing in their own people. Those who held faith that any cure existed outside of miracles and or special potions were few and far between. The population continued to die, and the amount of children born decreased tremendously. Benisharan himself died in 2193 at the young age of 143, without any descendants to leave the throne to. In fact, so few children were being born that Benisharan had trouble choosing an heir even from his own staff. As a result, he chose his 179-year-old uncle to take the throne after his death. It was later said that some higher power must have been involved in such a choice, as Benisharan was far too ignorant to choose an heir that made so much sense. That's gonna hurt. It was often customary to choose a child of a staff member if a king did not wish to choose or could not any of his own blood. Taken from the writings of Guildmaster Isham of the Guild of Legislators. Okay. King Emlyn took the throne in 2193 at the age of 179. Emlyn had been a guildmaster in the Guild of Healers, and it was said he took the throne with rage in his heart and fire in his mouth. Ooh boy, I like this guy already. He was extremely angered over public opinion of his guild and made it his mission to make sure that a cure was found. Some say he exhibited more power and authority than the throne in 1 week than his nephew had in 123 years. To be honest, it's not that high a bar to pass, apparently. Emlyn was fairly convinced that a cure lay in the books of old and had been encouraging the healers to look there long before his coronation as king. However, his nephew had been hesitant to allow access to the books, something that immediately changed once Emlyn had authority to look through them. Emlyn seemed to be a fairly devout follower of Yavo, and often claimed that only Yavo had healing, not the other gods that his people were seeking. In 2255, Emlyn became extremely ill, and most thought he was about to die. The Guild of Healers continued to try and prevent death, but the prognosis was very grave. It was during his days in the sickbed that he met a woman named Lalin. She helped to care for him, and as time passed, Emlyn himself found himself living just to see her one more time. As he wrote later, Lalin must have felt the same way. The new love seemed to forge a new will to live. Emlyn recovered, and to the day he died, praised Lalin for the reason he was able to defeat the plague. 2 years later, Lalin helped the rest of the Dene defeat the plague. Rumors say that while searching through the old histories that her relationship afforded her access to, she found hints as to where more of the old books had been kept. It was a few months later that the Book of Bereni, a particular book that Emlyn had always sought, was found. 6 years after the discovery, the Guild of Healers, led by Guildmaster Jason, considered the plague cured. Records point to tremendous celebration like it had never been seen before. A newfound optimism spread throughout the culture, and unofficially, the Dunny Renaissance began. It should also be noted that on this day in 2262, King Hamelin and Lallan wed in a grand ceremony. Sweethearts. In 2270, the first post-plague child was born, and Hamelin promised to give him the throne as a symbolic gesture of hope and celebration. Though Hamelin tried to use the end of the plague as a tool to encourage his people back to Yavo, it did not seem to succeed. Instead, there seemed to be a newfound love of the culture itself, of the arts, of technology, of further exploration into the truths of the universe. In 2350, the Minor Guild of Miners, following the encouragement of Hamelin, announced their plans for drastic improvement in mining methods and technologies. Hamelin left an upbeat but rather dazed culture to his successor when he passed away at the age of 342 in 2356. From The Healing of the Knee, written by Manish and Manasa in 2294, though others did live through the illness, healer records indicate a 95% fatality rate once the disease reaches later stages. Oh dear. A drink was developed that prevented the body from contracting the illness even when directly exposed. Oral vaccine! Not bad. Nice even. From The Healing of the Knee, written by Manasa in 2294. As a result, the day became a day often chosen for marriage in later years. Taken from the Journal of King Hamelin, written directly before his death in 2356. Nice that went over. I forget who this guy was, but he was the kid, apparently. Hopefully it wasn't Shomat. Shomat sucked. King Hanash. Hanash took the throne at 2533 at the age of 66. Hanash's first major accomplishment was the ordering of the construction of the new Guild of Miners facility. The construction marked the first use of extrusion in construction, and work begun in 2577 and finished in 2580, marked a much faster and more efficient means of building. Oh boy, we got concrete now, hooray! Hanash had been a member of the Guild of Stonemasons before his coronation. As such, records point to him being extremely interested in the mining and construction technologies that were being pursued. As well, Hanash was one of the strongest proponents for expansion within the cave system. Though Hanash's push for expansion was not met with much enthusiasm at the time, it set the foundation for the great expansion that would occur under the reign of his son Nidra, with the sculptor Lakir leading the charge. Hanash was apparently also very interested in pursuing his better relationships with other cultures, often pushing for further interaction and increased trade. He not only opened up the rules on trade, but also pushed the cultural rules concerning relationships with those of non-Dunny blood. In 2709, 5 years after the death of his first wife, who died giving birth to his fourth son, Hanash married a woman of non-Dunny blood. The fact that the marriage was met with little opposition was a sign in itself of the relaxing attitude of the people toward outsiders. Yay, less racism is good. The effect of such actions upon the culture was grand. Foreign materials were used much more in construction, as well as clothing and jewelry, and foreign music and art influence began to show itself in the Dunny arts of the day. It was apparently with some thankfulness that Hanash's second wife did not bear him a son. Though the culture had relaxed, it was rather clear the public had not wanted to even have to deal with the possibility of non-Dunny blood on the throne. In fact, one offer went so far as to say, even if they bore a child, it would have made for a very uneasy public to have such a being living within the palace. Perhaps the public taking the public's acceptance too far. Baby steps, people. You only make progress one step at a time, after all. You tend to jump the gun on progress. Some asshat tries to drag you back, you know. Hanash died in 2779 at the age of 312, leaving his fourth son to rule. There had been strict regulations up to that point concerning important goods and travel between ages. Up to that point, no one, most of all a king, dared to marry an outsider. From How They Came, a detailed look at what started the Metis War by Jamin, written in 7201. Ooh, I don't like that. That's some foreshadowing right there, that is. King Nidra. took the throne at 2779 at the age of 75. Niedre had been a member of the minor guild of sculptors at the same time as the great sculptor Lakir, and as a result, the two were excellent friends. As Niedre took the throne, Lakir, who was 4 years younger, was starting to be recognized. Those who had seen his work were already claiming him as one of the greatest artists that he had ever seen, even though most had never heard his name. Priorities. Niedre had always been a proud supporter of cave expansion, and once he gained the throne, he made it his mission to make sure that his people felt the same way. Niedre's 3 older brothers were very close to him, and in fact took the role of his closest advisors. Each was a guild master, the oldest of the Guild of Miners, the second of the Guild of Stonemasons, and the third of the Minor Guild of Architects. Because of their positions, each ended up having a great effect on the accomplishments of Niedre. Most of the evidence supports the fact that it was not Niedre's persuasive speeches or motivational abilities alone that pushed the expansions, but also the fantastic skill and talent of Lakir. He only needed one chance to prove his skill to the public, and Niedre gave him that opportunity in 2807 with the design of a monument for the discovery of the Book of Bereni. After that, Lakir, along with Niedre and his brother, presented a plan for a new residential district. From that point forward, it seems as though expansion could not have been stopped, even if someone had tried. Ooh, they got a fire under their ass now. Throughout the 221 years of Niedre's reign, 4 new districts were begun, including the residential Jaren, the elite district Calais, the business district Kali, or Kalai, I don't know, and the industrial district, managing importation and manufacturing of foreign goods, Noerl district. In 2916, the Guild of Mechanists announced industrial extrusion, allowing for further improvements on construction methods using unistructural buildings. Niedre passed away in the year 3000 at the age of 296. He had 2 daughters, but no sons of his own to give the throne. Instead, he chose the oldest son of his brother to succeed. From The Man from Jateri by Kamal, written in 3243. Instead of joining the blocks that had been used up to that point, unistructural construction allowed for the weaving of different stone, almost like a sweater. As one historian described it, making it appear as a single seamless piece of stone. So, concrete but more complicated, good to know. Alright, King Rekkeri took the throne in 3000 at the age of 81. In the same year of Rekkeri's coronation ceremony, a man by the name of Tavar was born. Beginning in 3077, many say he defined Rekkeri's reign more than Rekkeri himself. Tavar was an ardent follower of the great king and spent his entire growing up studying the king's teachings and words. By the time he was 65, he was apparently appalled at the state of his people, especially pertaining to religious matters. So he began on a small scale. In a matter of years, Tavar became one of the most influential men in Dunny history. Oh boy. He was a powerful leader, a gifted speaker, and a tremendous motivator, and by 3077, a well-known name. It was 3077 that Tavar publicly denounced the sects and his peoples, including the government's, lack of faith in the principles and laws of Yavo that they were founded upon. He often pointed to the council chamber and other government structures that now covered the tomb of the great king as a symbol of what the hearts and souls of Dani had become. There is no longer time for religion, as government and power have stolen our love, he stated numerous times. Most of the public seemed to agree with Tavar, especially concerning the tomb of the great king and its covering. They believed they never should have allowed it to happen. Although not remembered as a great event in itself, most historians agree that credit should be given to Rekkeri's reaction to teaching Tavar. Rekkeri at first was infuriated at Tavar's speeches and his apparent disapproval of the culture. In return, he denounced Tavar and his teachings and even threatened to have him imprisoned. In 3081, Rekkeri supposedly attended one of Tavar's speeches in an effort to ridicule it and give the other side to the public. Instead, he ended up in a public debate with Tavar. According to the witnesses, it was a debate that Tavar clearly won. Though Tavar handled the debate with the king as best he could, at times his words were rather harsh. Words to which the king had no response and ended up bringing quite a bit of ridicule upon himself instead of Tavar. However, instead of ordering Tavar's death, which he apparently could have done, he returned to his palace and thought about what he had heard. 5 days later, Rakeri personally invited Tavar to the palace, and later that same day announced that he had chosen Tavar as his main prophet, and asked forgiveness from his people for the wrongs not only of himself, but of the king before him. Those who personally witnessed the speech of King Rakeri left the event transformed. It was not long until their personal transformations began to change the entire culture. By 3100, 600 years after the government records showed 2,500 registered sects, there were 47 sects in existence. Only 10 of those sects' membership was greater than 500. The public seemed to return again to the beliefs their culture had been founded upon, those that Renaer had taught and the great king had expanded upon. The people were again unified, and much work was done to join the classes of rich and poor that, by that time, had already begun to separate. There was major renovation of the deteriorating districts, mostly poor, and construction of a new theater company and concert hall in the Bellari district, what had been one of the poorer districts in the entire city. In 3112, Rakeri announced, with Tavar by his side, plans for grand renovations and an almost complete reconstruction of the Great Temple. Rakeri also announced that the old land of Great Zero was accurate and should be honored again. The temple itself was to take advantage of handheld extruder technology that had been developed in 3092. As well as the great artist Folly was to paint the inside of this temple. As it turned out, it was Folly's final masterpiece, as he passed away in 3123, 6 months after the completion of the temple. For the remaining years of Rakeri's reign, expansion continued both outside and inside the tavern. New mining technology was seemingly announced annually, bringing with it great prestige to the already reformed Major Guild of Miners. Relatively newly formed, I mean. Tavar passed away at the young age of 218 in 3218. Rakeri was so greatly disturbed at his passing that he ordered 5 days of national sadness. There were minor protests from a few of the still remaining sects, who obviously did not follow the order. But for the most part, the Ni mourned with Rakeri over the loss of the prophet. Rakeri died a year after Tavar at the age of 300, leaving the throne to his firstborn son Tajara. From Yavo's Voice, written by Adish in 3143. Many witnesses' testimonies for the event are chronicled in Yavo's Voice. According to the prophetess Shama, Rakeri was greatly offended by the words. He refused to speak to anyone for 2 days following the debate. The women usually took the roles of prophets. The choice of Tavar was not one that no one argued. Shama herself was said to be thrilled that Tavar's wisdom was being sought. From Yavo's Voice, written by Adish in 3143 again. Considered by most to be the greatest artist of the Ni Renaissance. Da Vinci, why not? Sure. Well, I guess maybe it's more, Michelangelo? He did the Sistine Chapel, I think, to rip that. Oh, look at that, we're halfway through this thing, thank God. King Tajara took the throne in 3219 at the age of 114. Though his father was considered to be an extremely decent and honorable man, especially in his later years, Tajara did not follow in those footsteps. It said that he was an intelligent man, but that he used that intelligence and cleverness for his own personal gain throughout his life. In fact, rumors say that Tajara succeeded rather well at convincing his own father that he was the perfect choice for the throne, when most believe that one of his 2 younger brothers would have done much more for his people than he ever did. If there was one thing that seemed to direct Tajara's reign, it was personal gain. Ooh boy. He was known as a masterful pretender long after his death, while those who saw through his lies during his reign were few and far between. Due to Tajara's nature, there is not much good that can be said about his time on the throne. The palace underwent a major renovation in 3271, and in 3279 the Writers' Guild presented Tajara with the King's Age, one of the most beautiful and amazing ages that had been written up to that point. It was later discovered that Tajara had ordered the age written by 2 writers who eventually died of mysterious illnesses after their work was done. I hate this guy already. Tajara was married officially to one woman, although there are many rumors of multiple other companions. As it turned out, Tajara was also known in his inner circle to be an extremely jealous man, especially of his wife and the other woman in his life. Oh boy. I understand the wife, but why the random floozies? Jesus Christ, this guy's a mess. In 3285, Tajara's oldest brother was imprisoned for the creation of illicit ages, a crime he vehemently denied to the time of his imprisonment. Tajara expressed great sorrow at the sentencing, although it was later learned, well after Tajara's death, that the crime had been set up as punishment for Tajara had received as lustful look from his brother. No. Bad king, bad. In 3298, a guildmaster at the Guild of Miners who was killed in a freak accident while inspecting the progress of new tunnels. Again, it was later learned that Tajara had ordered the man killed due to a relationship he had many years earlier with one of Tajara's lovers, long before Tajara had met her. Come on, man. Though Tajara's reign was viewed as fairly repulsive by most, it is important to note that for the first time in their history, the people of the Ni remained strong and focused, even under the leadership of a poor king. The words and teachings of Tavar stayed in their hearts, and they focused on their personal lives, if they were pleasing to Yavo, more than their king. Well, it's easy to band together under someone who's an absolute ass, you know? Just like everyone can agree that guy sucks, you know? If there is anything good to be said of Tajara, it is that he did not destroy the fragile condition of his people. Religion was not important to him, and thus, though he never did anything to encourage his people one way or another, he did nothing to prevent those who wished to believe a certain way from doing so. Tajara died in 3422, at the age of 317, and left the throne to his third son, quote-unquote. Though Tajara claimed the boy was born of his wife, there are quite a few rumors that the boy was actually the first son of one of Tajara's younger maidens. The rumor was never proved either way, as both his wife and the maiden passed away 2 years after the boy was born. Although officially Tajara had 3 sons, it's possible he actually fathered 12 sons and 7 daughters, an exorbitant number for the Ni. Excerpted from the Grandmaster Gerens of the Guild of Riders private journal. From The Lost Son, written by Prophetess Halsey in 3422. Grandmaster Gerens' private journal from The Lasting Impact, written by the Grandmasters Travar and Alim in 3576. Oh, no, written by the grandson of Tavar, okay. It should be noted that most of these facts were not public information until long after Tajara's death. For the most part, the Ni honestly believed that Tajara had been a decent king. Though some began to judge the reign of Tajara by his son, it was not until much later, when truths were revealed, that public's opinion of Tajara truly changed. Little shit weasel. King Tiamul took the throne in 3422 at the young age of 39. Like his father, Tiamul's major concern was personal pleasure. Unlike his father, he seemed not to be nearly as clever as hiding his true intentions from his people. Ooh boy. In spite of Tiamul's inability to lead, a few worthwhile historic events were carried out during his reign. First was the construction of Stone Eater in 3469. Though Tiamul really had nothing to do with the Guild of Miners for his colossal tunneling machine, he claimed quite a bit of the credit at its christening. Of course. Grandmaster Naaman of the Guild of Miners, who did spearhead the effort, was irate at the lack of mention of his own name during the speech and made his thoughts public in the days that followed. Like his father, Tiamul carried out relations with quite a few different women, besides his wife Shama, who he married in 3477. Unlike his father, it was said of Tiamul that these women, including his wife, were much more easily persuaded him. Oh boy. Public opinion clearly believed that Shama was a rather incredible woman. Why she stayed with him through his entire life, even though his well-publicized affairs, was not as clear. Some said she used Tiamul in the marriage for her benefit, as she definitely had his ear. Others said it was because she was a faithful follower of Yavo and believed that the promise she had made to him was not meant to be broken. Regardless, it seems clear that Shama was an intelligent woman who, though it was never stated publicly, for all practical purposes held the throne from 3477 on. For in 3500, women became eligible for minor guild education. Though there had been women in participation in the minor guild before that point, actresses, etc., they had never been officially recognized as members of those guilds. Oh joy. Though there was a push to allow women to join the major guild as well as the minor, Shama herself gave a strong case to not allow such an event to happen in 3523. Okay, why? She strongly disagreed with women being in governmental positions, a seemingly ironic use. She was basically king of the knee at the time of her speech. Regardless, she argued that women had much more important duties, including the guiding of children. The push for such allowances seemed to fade away in the years following her speech. The old stay-at-home mom trope. Honestly, you'd probably do a stay-at-home dad trope if you feel like it. Like, just let the parent who raises the kid be the one who's good with kids, you know? Like, you don't, that's not really determined by anything, really. Just, I don't know. In 3574, Shama gave birth to Tiamal's first son, at least that the public knew of. For the remaining years of Tiamal's reign, Shama focused on the raising of her son, whom she vowed would not be the same kind of man as his father. Yeah, there's the rub, I guess. A daughter was born 30 years later, and Shama raised her with equal resolve. Again, though the people were not led well, they remained strong in their beliefs and purposes, someone ignoring the bad leadership of Tiamal and instead focusing on the high example of his wife. Tiamal passed away from an unknown disease in 3654 at the age of 271, giving the throne to his firstborn son. Written by the prophetess of Sheba in private journals from Shama, written by Leland 3890. Shama's words were spoken to the council as they debated whether or not to allow women into the major guilds. From The Lasting Impact, written by grandson of Var Elam in 3576. Yeah. Not bad. Making progress. King Kedri. Got an itchy nose, I'm sorry. Oh, hold on. Took the throne in 3654 at the age of 80. Kedri himself was seen by many as a testament to the type of woman his mother had been. The day of Kedri's coronation was the proudest moment of Shama's life. She often said, up until the day she passed away in 3689. Whether or not they agreed with Kedri's decisions, it seemed most did. There was seemingly hardly a single Dani who did not greatly respect and care for Kedri. He was the king for the people, and most historians agree, was the most popular king in the Dani history, besides the Great King. Kedri led a number of small proposals that often benefited the lower classes. At the same time, it seems, he assured the higher classes that the proposals were the right thing to do. Up to that point, the island had basically been set aside for the elite. It was Kedri who later established the district of Shamathan, later named to Karathan, as a more affordable residential district. He named it after his mother, the sweetie. Kedri also donated his own Age of the Kings, written during the reign of his grandfather, to the Common Library. He directed money to the massive renovation projects throughout Dani, including further additions to the Great Temple, the Opera House, and further renovation to Bellari, the deteriorating district that Makari had started years earlier. In the numerous books and journals written about Kedri, it is said that he often walked the streets of Dani and attended events with the rest of his people, as though he were one of them. He was married in 3686 at a public ceremony that was open to all who wished to attend. As one writer said of the event, if you did not want to be there, you did not want to be Dani. Kedri eventually passed away at 903 at the age of 329, leaving the throne to his firstborn son. Yeah, it's a good man. Next, King Lemishel took the throne in 3903 at the age of 100. Lemishel had been fairly involved in the minor guild of actors. although it was said that what especially interested in Le Michel was illusion. Up to that point, there had been a few different magic clubs, although nothing official. In 3961, Le Michel, quite a bit of trouble, forced the establishment of the Minor Guild of Illusionists. Hobbyists. It was not a guild that most found necessary, but Le Michel argued that neither was the guild of actors, painters, nor musicians. It was entertainment, of which illusion was a valid form. Ironically, it was later discovered that the establishment of the guild was an illusion in itself. While the guild was debated, Le Michel established an undercover intelligence force to keep track of the more dangerous factions and subgroups of Denis. They were a highly secretive group, of which the public had little or no knowledge until years later. And so, with the confirmation of the Guild of Illusions, the Religions, literally translated the unseen, were also established. Yeah, like, I think the people of Tyranny had the Religions too. Like, they were also unseen. By which I mean the slaves lived in the walls to tend to their every whim like the tyrants they are. That's why tyranny rhymes with tyranny, you know? Cyan wasn't being subtle with that book. It showed. Though the previous few kings had been fairly focused on Denis and expanding their culture and territory, Le Michel again looked toward the outside cultures in a manner that had not been since Inash. In 3975, he remarried, as his first wife had passed away at a young age, to an outsider. Unlike Inash, who had also married an outsider, Le Michel and his new wife bore a son, his first, 20 years later. In 3995, and another son in 4014. For the first time, the Denis were truly confronted with their views on outside cultures, and the arguments were said to have started as soon as Le Michel's son was born, as to whether or not he would be allowed to someday rule as king. Okay. Well, I think I auto-read. Let's check that again. Oh boy. Yeah, it's kind of complicated things. Unfortunately, though Le Michel led quite a few efforts to supply better lives for other cultures, along with freer trade and sharing of resources of other ages, the remaining years of his reign were dominated by whether or not his son would be allowed to reign. To Le Michel's credit, though he could have forced his will concerning his son upon his people, he never did. If his son were to eventually reign, he said, "It will only be a people who want him to." Fair enough. In 4030, the council decided that the king had to be of pure Denis blood. Le Michel signed the decision into law the following year. And probably hoping that condition would change. They could overrule that decision millennia later, I guess. I don't know. When you live for like 200 plus years, your people have time to make changes. Until they didn't, because, you know. Yeah. When he died in 4083, he left the throne to the youngest child of his cousin, whose mother had been the younger sister of his father, Kedri. Taken from his speech, the council arguing for the establishment of the guild. Le Michel did not need a council approval to establish the guild, though many kings referred to council approval. It was said later that Le Michel purposely wanted the debates to take place as a distraction. Sly dog. Alright, next up, King Ishak. Took the throne in 4083 at the age of 85. His grandmother had been Shama, and of Ishak it was often said that he ran his throne almost exactly as his uncle Kedri did. He was another of the people's kings and refused to separate himself from his people or view himself at a higher level than those he served. It seemed that king with such an attitude was hard to not like, and his popularity was closer to that of Kedri's. Like Le Michel, he focused on the involvement of non-Denis and their importance to Denis culture and expansion. His powerful words of equality between Denis and non-Denis were truly put to the test in 4103. Ishak and his wife had been touring a food facility run by natives on the age of Yamas. As it turns out, the party was ambushed, and Ishak's wife was taken by a group of natives who managed, using Denis linking books, to easily escape before Ishak or his guards could react. Ooh boy. As words leaked out of the event, the words animals, uncivilized, and primitive were used to describe those of other worlds in a way that had not been used since the Pento War. Ooh boy. Eshek fought the people's new perception and argued that not all outside cultures should be judged on a few radicals. His words, however, were seen as empty by much of the public as he waited for word on his wife. Word finally came. The Yimas wanted their own worlds to rule, as they felt the D'ni ruled them. They had specific demands for the kind of worlds, many of which were impossible, as they had no concept of the art of writing. Unless they were given the 3 worlds they demanded, Eshek's wife was to be executed. Many viewed Eshek as a faithful study of history, and in particular the Pento War, because of his knowledge of history and his belief in the integrity of the Yimas. He was fairly convinced that it was not the Yimas who wanted the books, but some small faction of the D'ni was directing them. Rumors say that he was even fairly convinced of that particular faction that was doing it. As was the case with the Pento War, it had not been the Pento War who were to blame, but the judges who had wrongly sought power. How many times we got to teach you this lesson, old man? Given Eshek's apparent distrust of some within his own people, more than those that were not the D'ni, he had been a strong supporter of the R'lyeh. As it turned out, it was their information that saved them. There were a number of groups who felt as though the D'ni should be completely sealed from other cultures. One in particular who had been especially vocal in their opinions, especially while Eshek's wife had been held captive, using the tragedy to further their own cause. It was to this group Eshek apparently directed the R'lyeh, ordering them to uncover any information they could. 3 days later, Eshek sent out word that he had no intention of giving the Yimas the worlds they had asked for. Hours later, R'lyeh informants followed 2 members of the faction Eshek had expected to an illegal age where his wife was imprisoned. Once the public had received word that it once again been their own people directing the operation, records indicate that they were greatly dismayed. Plans were uncovered that indicated the faction was to kill his wife no matter whether the ages were given or not, to only prove further that outsiders could not be trusted. In fact, it seemed as though the public was quickly learning that it was their own blood who could not be trusted. As R'enrefn, the Great King, had often said, it was a great power they had been entrusted with, and it is our own hearts that must be watched, a temptation too great to be resisted without strict rules or willing hearts. Yeah, you got the powers to link to literally anywhere in the multiverse. You better use that power goddamn right. As a result, there was a great push for strict guidelines for interaction with other ages as well as rules for the ages themselves. They sought the rules not because the other cultures were savages, but because our own culture could not be trusted to deal with them honorably. Eshek passed away at 4291 at the age of 293, leaving the debates to his firstborn son. Taken from city guard records, taken from conscripts of the Grandmaster Jakens of the Guild of Writers, speech to Eshek. Got the hiccups. Depending on sources, 2 different groups are credited with the kidnapping, although R'lyeh records indicate it was a group known as the Blood of Yavo. Other records indicate it was a group known as the Lad D'ni. I don't know. They found her at least. That's good to know. Taken from Book 1 of the Great King, From How They Came, a detailed look at what started the Midas War by Jamin, written in 7201. Noted. Next, King Lo-Shamanish took the throne in 4291 at the age of 123. Though Lo-Shamanish's reign was relatively short, it is believed that he had made the most of the years he was given. Lo-Shamanish had seen firsthand the effects of too much interaction with other cultures, and because that held firmly to his views, disagreeing with what was becoming the majority view in D'ni. He often pointed out, his father had also had, that before the Pento War, strict regulations had existed on interaction with other cultures, and it did nothing to stop the judges from their writings. Oh boy, here we go again. Lo-Shamanish himself stated, those who wish to take advantage of outside ages and peoples cannot be stopped. Must be first to listen within D'ni, not forced to take such extreme measures. When extreme measures are taken, the consequences must be increased. Oh, okay. In 4305, laws passed saying that creation or trading of illicit ages was punishable by permanent imprisonment on solitary prison ages. A fate some said was worse than death. Okay. Very Hammurabi eye for an eye going on here, Ethiel. In 4307, Loshamanesh passed, barely, another law saying that any Dani who coerced an outsider to commit a crime, no matter what the crime, was also punishable by permanent imprisonment. While the laws were passed, Loshamanesh encouraged further interaction with other cultures, while continuing to argue interaction itself was not the problem. However, it seems as though many failed to see his stance and still pushed for stricter measures on the Guild of Riders, and a complete sealing off of any interaction with outsiders. Yeah, people are smart. The people are a bunch of raving loonies. In 4334, the Age of Trices, a major mining age, was halfway destroyed because of the mistake of a native running the new machines that had been established there. Families were forced to evacuate, and in one particular odd case, supposedly a child was born while the mother had been linking from traces back to Dani. Regardless, the destruction of the age was another cause of the argument for those who wished to seal themselves off in a case that Loshamanesh argued could have happened regardless of who was running the machine. Sadly, in 4438, Loshamanesh was assassinated by the same faction who had kidnapped his mother years earlier, making his life an example of what he had often preached. It was the Dani who had to change. If they did not, he had argued, problems would always exist whether or not outsiders were involved. He left the throne to his first son of his younger brother, as he had no children of his own. It be your own peeps. The call's coming from inside the cavern and all that. Jesus Christ. Taken from a public speech explaining his signing of the laws. Oh, that's the only. Okay. Up next, we got G. Took the throne in 4438 at the very young age of 36. The combination of an apparently immature and weak king, along with the tension that was growing within Dani over the outsiders and religious principles, went down in history as a bad one. At the start of his reign, government records say G was overtaken with his new palace life and the luxuries it afforded him. He seemed much more concerned with what kind of food he would be served for breakfast than whether or not Dani should pull back all its people who were living on outside ages, as some were suggesting, wrote an anonymous author. Well, I suppose the do-nothing king is better than a do-the-wrong-thing king, you know? Because of his apparent lack of concern over the real issues, it was the Grand Masters who quickly became the most frustrated with G. It was said by a few Grand Masters in private journals that G would wholeheartedly agree with them while they presented their strategies and plans, then agree with their challengers an hour later. Oh boy. The indecision by G made for little evidence of progress and complete frustration for most of Dani. For the first time in many years, the signs of division began to appear, as they had during the 2500s. The once unified religious beliefs showed signs of splitting, the once unified classes began to separate into rich and poor, the once confident rulers of worlds began to wonder whether they could rule even themselves. Oh boy. That Rulers of Worlds title, that's got a whole bunch of ego behind it, so, like, maybe just World Walker? That sounds nice. I don't know. Adding to the confusion were the words of the Watcher. The Watcher had become to be called was the child who was born between ages and now, rumor said. They had the ability to see beyond time, past, present, and future. In 4500, he wrote Words, a 625-line volume describing his visions of Dani. Oh yeah, I got a copy of that in Rialto. Much of the book dealt with a great destruction of Dani that would one day occur, and the signs that would come with that destruction. Many claimed that the book was seizing upon the chaos of the day and dismissed it as rubbish, while others seemed to be rather intrigued. Fair enough, I'm intrigued. Also in 4500, Guildmaster Kenneth of the Guild of Legislators brought forth a proposal that would allow the use of private education, separate from the guilds. Although many seemed frightened of the idea, as education and the guilds had always been thought of as inseparable, The proposal eventually passed by a slim margin. G seemingly had little to say on the proposal one way or another. G was married in 4502 to Melaine, a woman who had been married to 3 previous times. It was G's first, and a prophetess advising him had strongly spoken against it. The marriage lasted 25 years before ending, and marked the first time any king had divorced one of his wives. Ooh, she sounds fun. G remarried in 4565 to a woman 100 years younger, something culturally accepted. That's accepted with an EX if you can't read. So not accepted. It was the rumors that she was the daughter of the Watcher that created problems. She denied the claim, but did show quite a bit of interest in his writings and convinced G to do the same. The marriage lasted until 4645, when G's wife vanished. Some said outsiders had taken her, since nothing had been resolved concerning them. Others said G had murdered her, and others said she returned to her father to watch her, even though the Watcher died in 4606. G's final wife was one of his own prophetesses he had sought for advice, marking another first for a king. The two were married until G's death in 4692. He left the throne to the third son of a close friend. He was 290 years old. To sum up G's reign, one author wrote, "There was a collective sigh of relief throughout the cavern on that day he finally left us." Ouch. Spoken by Knaefter in debates at the council in 4500. It seems private education never really received near the admiration or respect from the public, and thus never truly succeeded. Counted among those still wanting more strict guidelines pertaining to outside involvement. One of G's gardeners claimed he witnessed the murder with his own eyes. Oh boy. Though the Watcher was believed to have died in 4606, there are numerous rumors of people claiming to have seen him and talked to him, taken from a recently discovered manuscript that was apparently never published. Oh boy. Alright, we skip over this guy, because we read that book already in Dakota. And, King Yablashan took the throne in 483 at the age of 109. Though most commentaries say that he held the same beliefs as his father, it seems he was not nearly as strong and thus did not carry the level of respect that his father had, a character trait that some of the more violent factions preyed upon. DeMaff had managed to refocus the need to a large part. However, the few factions who still desired to make their case were able to make Yablashan's reign an unpleasant one. Unpleasant, I mean. In 4865, the blood of Yavo kidnapped Yablashan's first son from the Guild of Chemists. In a letter, the faction said they would kill the king's son if one of their own leaders was not released. Yablashan ordered Dorelia to find his son, but they were apparently unable to do so. Apparently, later it was discovered that a key member of Dorelia had joined the blood of Yavo and was aiding them. Ooh boy. Feeling forced, Yablashan gave in to demands and released the prisoner they had asked for. The body of his son appeared on the steps of his palace a few days later. That's some freaking Sherlock Holmes shit, or Mr. Police. I gave you all the clues, or the damn. The death of Yablashan's son, along with newfound evidences of a mole in Dorelia, further separated the knee into two sides. Those who wished to end outside intervention were becoming stronger, publicly raising their cause almost daily. Those who followed the majority were growing angrier and less tolerable of those who did not. As a result, there is little doubt that there were very few of the knee left who fell into the middle ground. There were even less, including Yablashan, who could bridge the two sides. Yablashan, in an apparent attempt to divert his people's attention from the brewing wars, decided in 4889 to announce remodels for all the 18 major guilds. It was the first of its kind since none had been founded, and warmly embraced by the guilds. Under the announcement, Yablashan changed some of the original restrictions of Arena-Ref, offering the guilds more liberty and the structures they could build. In 4901, Yablashan stated his plans for a new common library located directly within the Vayman district of Denis, a middle-class district. In 4910, he announced his plans for a new park to be built on Nerif Island, named after Renaref, apparently. In 4914, 3 new recreation ages were placed within the park as gifts from the Guild of Writers in order to celebrate the completion of their new guild. Yay! The diversions seemed to do their job until 4954, when an explosion occurred on the age of Mianus, killing 400 outsiders and 78 Denis. It was apparently the result of a bad combination of gases, one that Denis had brought with them, and the other already in existence on Mianus. Another push was began to seal themselves from outside influence. Did you miss the part where you brought the stuff? You brought the catalyst? Bloody hell. Also, Mianus lost more people than you, so they have more right to say you should get out of their place. The Reliama, who were usually counted on in these situations, apparently had no information as to the effects of the explosion. They are still apparently in the midst of their own chaos, trying to discover the mole. There were some who thought the explosion had been a setup, but it could not be proven. In 5043, Yablashan placed a man by the name of Farish in charge of the Guild of Illusionists. His first mission, as ordered by Yablashan himself, was to find whoever was destroying Doreliama's ability to gain knowledge. Though most believed that Farish had been more interested in actual illusions than the unseen, he was also known as an extremely intelligent man and immediately put into action a plan to clean up Doreliama. He also began construction of a house on one of the private islands of the cavern that blatantly demonstrated his love for illusions. Yablashan died in 5081 at the age of 347. He never had any other children after his son was killed and left the throne to his youngest brother-in-law, his younger sister's husband. Goshen had imprisoned on a prison book 50 years earlier by the Math, from How to Game, a detailed look at what started the Midas War by Jamin, written in 7201. Mianus was well known for its production of mining machinery, from Revealing the Unseen, written by Besharin in 5999. Okay. Next. King Eamon took the throne in 5081 at the age of 150. 2 years after its coronation, 2 members of the Reliama mysteriously disappeared and were never seen again. Farish became a silent hero of the key members of the government, and the factions were again quieted, knowing they were being watched. Ooh boy. Key members of the government were often seen at parties taking place in Farish's mansion, and rumors of puzzle rooms and secret halls grew throughout the city. The house itself, located on Kalfa Island, was becoming one of the more talked-about buildings in the entire cavern. Sounds fun. In 5093, 2 members of a cult known as One Denis were proven guilty for the explosion that occurred years earlier on Mianus. Both were permanently imprisoned. Why is it always your own peeps? You need to do something about your peeps. At the same time, Eamon, along with the Guild of Caterers, announced the completion of 2 new food ages, one of which was run solely by outsiders and produced new food sources that had never been tasted in Denis before. The popularity of Farish's mansion caused others, mainly elite, to request permission to build on the many islands that surrounded the city proper. In 5095, Eamon decided to sell many of the islands that, up to that point, had been government property. Records indicate that the sale over 23 of the islands in 1 year to private citizens who could afford their heavy price tag. In 5102, disaster hit the family of Farish and the mysterious death of his daughter. Official city guard records said she awoke in the middle of the night, claiming to see spirits, and jumped from her bedroom window to her death. Rumors abounded as to the true cause. Some thought the house was haunted, while others, mainly government, thought she might have been the target of factions. What, is there some sort of... So, what, to give her shrooms while she was next to a window or something? I don't know. Perhaps the most damaging rumors dealt with the Watcher. In words, he had described similar events taking place. Such a public event caused many to study his words again. It was the beginning of philosophical chaos yet again. Farish left the house a year after the death of his daughter, claiming to be unable to live with the memories of his daughter. The house was given completely, although no one knew it at the time, to Aurelia Ma. Rumors of dark shadows in windows and boats silently rowing toward the island fueled the idea the house was haunted. God damn it, your secret agency has its own ghost story. That's... well done. We have reached peak fiction. It appears that after Aurelia Ma controlled the house, Eamon himself often made visits, recommending a number of renovations, tunnels, etc., that he thought would aid them in their cause. In 5202, a public ferry system was approved by Eamon, offering much more frequent access between the island, the city proper, and the surrounding smaller islands. One of those islands Eamon gave to the minor guild of artists, musicians, and actors, who turned into a cultural center. In the later years, the center hosted outside concerts, plays, etc. on the water. Sounds fun. 4 years before Eamon's death, the Guild of Stonemasons announced Deratheni. The substance had been produced in a laboratory for the first time and was the start of much improved construction techniques. Eamon died in 5240 at the age of 309, leaving the throne to his firstborn son. This was not public information around 6000. However, the discovery of the moles was well known in the higher circles of the government. From haunted by her cries, ooh, that's a ghost story waiting to happen, she, Moss, and Harrius became known for a large variety of fruits and vegetables that naturally grew on each. From Haunted by Her Cries, written by Hay in 5120. Okay. Words has numerous references to dreams and mourning in the streets, which many interpreted to describe the death of Farish's daughter. No, I'm pretty sure the dreams was Catherine writing dreams, and the mourning in the streets was, the actual Fala Denny. But that's just my interpretation of a good couple thousand year old piece of documentation. Deratheni was a white light stone which proved to be extremely strong. You saying we can make stone airplanes now? Unobtainium, you say? That sounds fun. King Adish. Adish took the throne in 5549 at the age of 49. Though Adish was young, it was also said he was mature for his age, and took quite a bit of advice from the prophetess Trisari, who had also served his uncle. Adish was apparently a religious man, but not an especially accepting man. Oh boy. The prophet Gish arrived on the scene in 5574 and began preaching, similar to what Travar had done years earlier. Unlike Travar, Gish praised the words of Yavo, but nothing else. The great king, he said, was a farce, as was Tavar. He denounced his people for claiming that Tagon was more important than following Yago's commands. He had declared that Tavar and the great king had used Tagon as an excuse to do what they wanted, and it was time to focus on Yavo's commands again. I thought the whole process of Tagon loving up the mind was to better understand Yavo and follow his commands better. You can do both, Though Gish was not the first to say such things, for some reason the public came in droves to listen to him, making him an extremely popular figure. The good old-fashioned charisma check. Adish announced Gish's words at every level, and arrested him numerous times. And by such actions only encouraged Gish, arguably, making his impact upon the society even larger than what it otherwise would have been. Gish continued his preaching until, in an apparent fit of rage, Adish ordered Aurelia Ma to kill him. It was said later the decision was most likely the worst of his reign. Aurelia Ma succeeded in their mission in 656-75. There was extreme outrage at the king as well as the official church. Exactly as Gish had taught, Adish had justified killing a man, strictly against the laws of Yavo, because he felt there was something more important than what was justified because of Tagon. Ooh boy. Gish became a martyr, and those who followed him increased. Bloody hell. Adish made attempts to draw his people back, but it was too late. There are apparently very few people, even ardent followers of the great king, who could agree with his decision. In fact, it was rumored that it was one of Adish's close advisors who killed him in 5701 at the young age of 201. The throne was left to his firstborn son, Lanaran. The word literally means to love the mind. implying to have a close personal knowledge of the other person, or in certain cases, Yavo. It had been taught that in order to gain access to the perfect age, Yavo only required such a relationship and nothing else. Basically, don't be an ass. From Yavo Alone, written by Gish, taken from the private journals of Chasari. Many think it was in fact Chasari who convinced Adish to make the order. From the Followers, written by Manish. Dollars, what is this? This the internet? Well, no, it's not. Well, it is the internet, but like, it's not 2012 internet. King Lannerin. Lannerin took the throne in 5701 at the age of 98. Lannerin had not been close to his father, and as a result, was not much like him. Good. It was rumored that it was because of Lannerin that Adish's own advisor had killed Adish. He knew Lannerin would give the people what they wanted. Oh boy. Lannerin immediately denounced the action of his father in killing Gish and informed the public of the existence of the Aurelia, their involvement in the death of Gish, and promised to rid them from all government activities. The announcement was a shock to the public and a huge blow to those who had served the Aurelia. Yeah, how are they supposed to eat now? Actually do magic? Well, sage magic, I mean. I don't know. Most ended up living in hidden private ages, while a few were murdered after their years of service to the government. Yeah. The loss of the Aurelia again gave the factions hope that they would be able to carry out their demonstrations again. However, Lannerin also promised to rid outsider involvement, meaning the factions had no need for such acts. Oh boy. It's believed that the promise was not one that Lannerin necessarily meant to keep, but instead one he intended to pretend he was trying to meet to keep the factions happy. Oh boy. Nothing says a government strength like a people pleaser at the top, who willingly give away government secrets that cost people their lives. He also believed wholeheartedly in the plan to build a tunnel to the island and was able to push it through in 5714, as Mayheman had not been able to. While Stone Tooth was busy digging, Lannerin promised that his next task would be to continue expansion by the Ashemen district with eventual plans to create new residential and cultural districts. Lannerin also ordered the major guilds to begin work on replacing all ages that required outsider involvement. He demanded ages that would carry out the same task without outside involvement. Most guild masters knew the plan would take years and years, and though they did not agree if it, they agreed to attempt it. In 5721, new techniques were developed to incorporate structural reinforcement and extrusion-based construction, some that would aid construction of the districts Lannerin had promised. In 5734, the tunnel connecting the island with the city proper was cancelled. Stone Tooth had been working on it for over 20 years, but the guild masters were already required by Lannerin to replace a huge number of ages were not about to connect their homes on the island with the city proper. Oh boy. The poors are making their way to our homes. Whatever will we do with our infinite money? Lannerin agreed, as there were further concerns that such construction could affect the lake level or even the algae within the lake. That's an actual concern, you know? That actually makes sense. Instead, Stone Tooth was ordered to begin clearing out more space next to the Ashemen district. In 58-56, construction was begun on the new Lannerin district. Stone Tooth was ordered to begin further exploration of the cavern by the way of new tunnels. In 5902, the guilds announced 4 new ages to replace some of those being used by outsiders. The announcement meant little, except to have the factions believe that eventually outside involvement would be finished. 5903 marked the first inhabitants of the Lannerin district, mostly manual laborers who worked in the adjoining Ashemen. The Aurelia were officially finished with their work in 5986. The announcement was fairly quiet, as most of their work had ceased long before that. In 5999, Lannerin passed away at the very old age of 396. He left the throne to his 5th and youngest son. From Revealing the Unseen, written by Basharin in 5999. From the private journals of Grandmaster Kimon and from the Guild of Legislators. From The Lost Tunnel, written by Lasham in 6034. The environmental damage claimed by Lannerin and then the environmentalists was never proven. God damn it. Most agree it was an easy way out for Lanneran, who then did not have to admit he was bullied by the Grandmasters who lived on the island. 3 of the ages were food ages, while the 4th was meant to replace one of the major manufacturing ages. In reality, none of them were ever used to the extent that the ages they were replacing had been used. It's kind of like you need people to run machines and stuff, you know? Alright. Skip 1, go over to King Jaren. Took the throne in 6284 at the age of 83. He was apparently, much like his father, more interested in keeping everyone happy than declaring one side of the debates concerning philosophy, advancements, or outside involvement in right or wrong. As a result, though the people were satisfied, there was further division among them. The elite and the poor became more divided, and though there was quite a bit of new construction and renovation in both the elite and poor districts, there was nothing then to join the two. For some reason, Jaren was obsessed with the expansion and exploration of the cavern. There were rumors that his sections stand from the Watcher prophecies, and one in particular said, because of tunnels, the knee has changed forever. Jaren never said it was what drove him, but throughout his reign he pushed a guild of miners, mechanists, and engineers and surveyors to work together to create new drills and machinery. He had plans to widen the Rudenna Passage, which when opened would allow for further expansion. In 6430, the announcement came. Rockbiter and the Burrower were both christened in a great ceremony, then immediately put to work. Stonetuth and Stoneater were used for further city expansion. When the once violent factions that existed were for the most part dissolving. Many of the members had seemingly beginning to call themselves followers of Yavo, as Gish had been. Although they did not support outside involvement, they believed it was best to obey Yavo and hope for a peaceful solution. Though Jaren carried out a few meetings with the factions, the dissolution of the factions had little to do with his policies or leadership. If it works, it works. Regardless, he was able to focus on mining efforts without consequences. Yay, big things go brrr! It was a luxury that previous kings had not been afforded, and the main reason some of the greatest expansion in the history began under Jaren. Jaren himself died in 6498 at the age of 297. Though he did see the completion of the expansion of the Rudenna Passage, he never saw the new areas to which the passage led. He left the throne to his third son. No anecdotes, because he was a simple man. He liked big things with big spinny things on them. Yay. Last book, also yay. King Rikuf took the throne in 6498 at the age of 56. Though young, he had 2 older brothers and a sister with whom it was said he often consulted. They each understood the logic of giving the throne to the youngest son, guaranteed more time in the throne for the individual, and worked well with their younger brother, who had no family, as no other family had done previously. Rikuf's first major decision came in 6510, when a new cavern was found by expeditions led by Rockbiter and the Burrower. There were calls to expand the city, but Rikuf was apparently unconvinced it was a smart plan. His older brother, who happened to be guildmaster of the Guild of Surveyors, agreed to study the cavern extensively, and Rikuf promised to make a decision upon reading results of the study. In the meantime, Rikuf married in 6556 to a woman named Hisha. Her father was Grandmaster of the Guild of Chemists and a strong believer in Gish and the fallacy of the Great King. Though Hisha had some influence on Rikuf, he continued in the tradition of his fathers, never publicly stating his views on philosophy. However, she had much more influence on the 3 sons that they would eventually have together, including the youngest, Karath. It was her influence that would change the knee forever. Ooh boy. In 6601, extremely detailed reports, structural analysis, water supply, rock type, etc., came back informing Rikuf that though the newly discovered cavern was habitable, it would be very expensive to build in. Rikuf made the decision, after conferring with his advisors, that Stonetuth, along with the new Rockbiter, should begin digging out more of the city proper into the cave wall for expansion, while Burrower and Stoneater will continue to tunnel past the cavern. In 6676, Rikuf met with leaders to discuss the involvement of outsiders. Though there had been no major incidents for hundreds of years, it was still an issue to be discussed. In the meetings, it became apparent that though Rakuf understood the reason for wishing to close down interaction with outsiders, it was a ridiculous thought. Their contribution to the Dene culture, art, construction, technology, and resources was immeasurable. Unless there were grand reasons not to, there was no way, he argued, that he would ever force strict resolutions regarding the outsiders. In his older years, it appeared as though Rakuf had become tired of Hisha and her views and opinions. She was expelled from the palace along with Karaf in 6700. It was well known that Karaf was a model of his mother's thoughts, and Rakuf could hardly stand him. Though Rakuf had chosen an older brother of Karaf to be king, his thoughts were changed. As the legends told, Rakuf was on his own deathbed, staring out toward the arch, and he saw his son Karaf sailing through it. He was riding a boat in the shape of a massive lizard, sailing proudly on its prow, and had come home to announce the death of his mother. As he sailed through the arch, Rakuf apparently felt the hand of Yavo, directing him to make Karaf the next king of the Dene. By the end of Rakuf's reign, the city was larger than ever. The classes were more divided than ever, and the religious beliefs were as divided as ever. Though there were not a large variety of beliefs, there was no clear majority of people who believed any one thing. Rakuf passed away in 6731 at the age of 289, leaving the throne to his third son, Karath. He left him a city that was larger than it had ever been, and fairly evenly divided in its views of the future. Years later, it will be a forceful argument for council ruling. From The Last King, written by Yamas in 7002. From How They Came, a detailed look at what started the Midas War by Jamin, written in 7201. From The Last King, written by Yamas in 7002. And we skip over Karaf because we read Karaf in the Dakota Alley, and Karaf was the last king of the Dene, so we're done! Yay! I need to go to the bathroom real quick, so we'll be back next time.